join me in welcoming to the stage Lieutenant General Robert Shea, U.S. Marine Corps retired, President and CEO of AFCEA International.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome, and hope everybody is ready for a great final day here. We've got a lot of exciting things still to go, so we're pleased to have everyone here. But before I begin, I'd like to thank the San Diego Military Advisory Council for joining us today. Please join me in welcoming Rear Admiral retired Mark Balmert, Executive Director, Clifford Cho, President of the Board of Directors, and all the San Diego Military Advisory Council members in attendance this morning. Thank you for your support and thank you for being here as we move forward. Well, we've got a great turnout. This morning we're honored to have Admiral Christopher W, Commander U.S. Fleet Forces, as our keynote speaker to kick off the third and the final day of West 2019. Admiral Grady, a native of Newport, Rhode Island, and a graduate of the University of Notre Dame, is the current commander of the United States Fleet Forces Command based in Norfolk, Virginia. He mans, trains, and equips 125 ships, 1,000 aircraft, and 103 active duty service members and government employees. As a commander of U.S. Fleet Forces Command, he's responsible for providing combat-ready forces to the numbered fleets and combatant commanders around the globe in the support of the United States national interest in this very, very critical juncture of time in our history. During his past assignments, he commanded the United States Sixth Fleet, Striking and Support Forces NATO, Naval Surface Force Atlantic, Carrier Strike Group 1, USS Carl Vinson Carrier Strike Group, Desron 22, the Cole, USSF Chief, and USS Arden. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Admiral Grady to the stage.
Well, good morning, everyone. And first, let me thank Bob Shea for introducing me and for his steadfast leadership of AFCEA over the last several years. Thank you, Bob, and I'm grateful to be here in San Diego with you in this 29th year of partnership with the Naval Institute. And Pete Daly, thank you for inviting me. I must say the Institute is in great hands and has really flourished under your leadership, and you and your team are certainly advancing our collective understanding of sea power and all issues crucial to global security. So we recognize the SDMAC, and I really appreciate all that they do, but I'd like to recognize Bob and Pete for what they do. So how about a round of applause for Bob and Pete? So this expo is, without a doubt, the premier sea services event on the West Coast. As usual, it is a fantastic gathering, especially since there's so many Notre Dame grads here in the audience. There you go. And there really isn't anything else like it. And in this room, we have security practitioners like me, dedicated industry professionals who build our platforms and weapons, and the talented designers of our communications and electronic systems. And this, bringing these all together, is truly an opportunity for synergy. The open dialogue here at the West Conference, the strong bonds formed amongst these three groups, contribute to the nation's defense in a way that is much greater than the mere sum of its parts. Now, as I start, I have to note that both AFCEA and the Naval Institute have origins that trace back to the period before the American Civil War, and especially following the end of that conflict. Both were founded by dedicated military professionals who felt the need to take some leadership within our national security establishment during a time of great transition by engaging in important discourse, and I think that continues today. And I think our national defense strategy makes clear that we are once again in a period of great change. The security environment is now more complex, it's volatile, and more volatile than at any time in recent memory. And so great power competition, not terrorism or contesting rogue regimes, great power competition is now our primary focus. So as revisionist and revanchist powers, both China and Russia, aim to share their world consistent with their own authoritarian model, holding sway over other nations' economic, diplomatic, and security decisions, their goal is to leverage conventional military strength, influence operations, and predatory economics to fracture our alliances and shift regional balances of power in their favor. They seek to challenge and replace the post-World War II order that has fostered unprecedented peace and security around the globe. And I believe that our Navy is poised and ready to meet this challenge. Indeed, we are in a maritime era. In fact, I would say that we have in the National Defense Strategy what is really a maritime strategy. And right now, as much as ever before, your Navy is critical to securing America's place in the world. It is defending far forward, providing for our common defense, promoting prosperity and security, and preserving our strategic influence around the globe. We are truly America's varsity away team, America's varsity global team. And in fact, our defense strategy relies on your Navy to fill the roles of the contact, blunt, and surge forces, and increasingly, the Homeland Defense Forces as well, something I know very well as the NAV North Commander. So it is truly an arena of continuous competition across the diplomatic, informational, military, and economic elements of national power, an arena which spans the entire spectrum of rivalry from peaceful competition to violent conflict, and an arena where we must compete, fight, and win in every domain. And I believe the Navy has a unique role amongst the services in that we play a significant role in all instruments of national power. We promote economic prosperity by ensuring the shipping which rides on the surface and the data on the cables on the seafloor can safely transit across the Great Commons free from threat or coercion. Similarly, we advance our interests in the diplomatic realm. And you just simply have to picture 100,000 tons of diplomacy sitting off your coast to get an idea of how we contribute there. And of course, militarily, we should be justifiably proud of the lethal options that we provide our national policymakers. At the high end of spectrum of conflict, the overwhelming military advantages that we have long held are now once again contested. For decades, we have enjoyed unchallenged supremacy in every domain. We could generally deploy and project power where and when we wanted. Now, I believe our Navy faces an ever more lethal and complex battle space with effects combined across domains and with operations conducted at increasing speed and reach. So much like the last time where we engaged in great power competition with the Soviets, we must prepare ourselves to fight for control of the seas to enable power projection ashore. And if left unaddressed, our ability to deter aggression will be diminished, endangering our ability to win decisively if deterrence fails. And we are adapting to this reality and responding with urgency by maintaining control of the high-end fight. We are doing this while understanding that the competition extends beyond the maritime domain into space, cyber, and the electromagnetic spectrum. So the bottom line here is that your Navy has an imperative to respond to these challenges, to maintain our competitive advantage, and I believe that we are doing just that. Now, as the Fleet Forces Commander, I see things through two lenses, the fleet lens and the foundry lens. The fleet encompasses the combined combat power that we bring to the fight and how we fight, the lethality of our weapons and our systems, the flexibility inherent in our highly maneuverable platforms, the ability and agility enabled by things such as our logistics forces, our cutting-edge tactics, and of course, our true competitive advantage, the center of the universe, the expertise, creativity, and toughness of our warfighters, our sailors. Meanwhile, the fleet's combat power is built on the foundry. The foundry entails the whole-of-nation effort required to generate readiness. It includes the industrial base which maintains and modernizes our fleet. True patriots, like every one of you here, working in the public and private sector with special emphasis on those skilled craftsmen whose mastery makes our fleet the most capable in the world. The foundry includes the high-end training ecosystem, things like Ready Relevant Learning and live virtual and constructive training that is so crucial for our people. And it includes the governance and policy which sets the direction for how our Navy runs. So the actions we take to generate readiness in the foundry build credible deterrence for the fleet, which allows the Navy to defend our interests. So from both the fleet and the foundry perspective, we are keeping our cutlass sharp and sharpening our competitive advantage across many blades, and I want to talk about two of those today. So from the fleet perspective, we are sharpening our competitive edge by developing a new operational approach to winning the high-end fight at sea with what we call Distributed Maritime Operations, or DMO. Put simply, we must be able to fight into and throughout persistently contested environments in order to blunt enemy aggression and then defeat it. And our Distributed Maritime Operations concept does just that. Leveraging the principles of distribution, integration, and maneuver, DMO is designed to deny the adversary their objectives and stopping their military offensive in its tracks. Now, as you are probably aware, recent fleet doctrine and capabilities prescribe force concentration in order to preserve security afforded by mutual support, or more commonly known as defense in depth. But I think in this return to great power competition, we need to realize that given the growing capacity and reach of our competitors, force concentration might be problematic. It enables an adversary to seize the advantage should an element of our concentrated forces be discovered. Now we know that massing effects rather than massing forces can readily achieve decisive results. Distributed forces, enabled by the proper degree and manner of an integration, allow the U.S. Navy to take the offensive, massing overwhelming combat power and effect at the decisive timing and place of our choosing. This integration of platforms and weapons and systems and sensors via low probability of intercept and detection networks will improve our battle space awareness while complicating the enemy's own scouting efforts. DMO will more readily utilize maneuver to apply combat power within and across all domains in a more flexible manner, allowing our forces to exploit uncertainty and achieve surprise. The combination of distribution, integration, and maneuver will impose operational dilemmas that may compel the enemy to disperse or expose its forces to detection, and this will enable our forces to seize and maintain the initiative while also diminishing the enemy's risk tolerance. Now, absolutely critical to distributed maritime operations, to DMO, is the Navy's operational architecture. You may have heard it called the Navy Tactical Grid or the Joint Tactical Grid, but what I'm referring to here with the Navy operational architecture is more than the tactical grid that connects our distributed nodes. It also includes the data storage, processing power, an overarching data strategy, and the analytics tools to support fast, sound decisions. The Navy operational architecture delivers the integration in the distribution, integration, and maneuver of DMO, and its purpose is to provide actionable information to humans and machines across the tactical and operational levels of war. Now, this Navy operational architecture consists of 4 overarching technology areas that include networks, infrastructure, data architecture, and then finally tools and analysis. Networks referring to the data links, the radios, the antennas, the switches, the routers and protocols that transport information around the battle space. Critically, we must possess the ability to dynamically maneuver our data transport pathways across the electromagnetic spectrum based on real-time conditions. The infrastructure consists of the computing power, processing capacity, and data storage required to transform data into actionable information. Now, we already have infrastructure, but in my view, it's too stovepiped and purpose-built for existing systems. And in fact, the infrastructure we build needs to be designed in such a way that it can be easily modified or adapted in real time and over time. The third technology area is the data itself, and we require an overarching data architecture and data strategy to set policies, procedures, standards, and governance to assure we are working with trusted data. It allows us to have a common vocabulary, and it sets the structure necessary to curate and maintain authoritative, trusted data sets. And finally, tools and analytics refers to the common services and analytical tools which analyze, display, and act on data in ways that allow for new insights and translate them into more readily understandable forms, such as things like battle management aids, tactical decision aids. And one outcome that I am keenly interested in is how we might be able to use AI tools and decision aids to improve the network itself, network performance, and enable network agility and maneuverability. So as you can see, the Navy operational architecture is all about gaining and maintaining decision superiority at speed in the high-end fight. It is the glue holding the DMO concept together. By sharing critical data collected from across the battle space, analyzing and synthesizing it in real time, we gain a decision advantage, a competitive edge. And the Navy operational architecture is the tool which allows us to speed our decision cycle. Now, from the Foundry perspective, we've been generating a lot of startup current lately back at the headquarters on one of my strategic lines of effort, which is to revolutionize our approach to readiness. Now, you may be guessing about the word revolutionize and what I mean. And as I was coming up with my theory on this, I'll tell you I chose that word very carefully. I considered other words like transform or evolve or mature, but they just don't convey the vital importance of getting this right and the step change in outcomes that we need. I say this because to win great power competition and to maintain our competitive advantage, particularly given our customary fiscal constraints and restraints, we need to bend the curve on readiness, and we need to proceed with some urgency. This is because while we build the Navy the nation needs, we must be able to fight with the Navy the nation has. Remember, 70% of the Navy that we have today, we will fight with in 2030. So as fleet commander, I am in the readiness business. And I would tell you, I'm not happy that we lack analytically based integrated readiness assessment capability, and I believe that that hampers our agility. We need to squeeze more fleet readiness out of every dollar we get, and we currently experience too much friction in both the force generation and resource allocation process supporting readiness. So I chose the term revolutionize because we need some fundamental changes in how we approach readiness, how we generate it, analyze it, measure it, integrate it, articulate what we need, and predict what the return on our readiness investment might be. So as we build out this Revolutionize Readiness campaign plan, we'll look for readiness improvements across three focus areas. The first area is operational readiness, and the goal here is to maximize the effectiveness of today's fleet, or being able to fight and win with the Navy the nation has. Secondly, we want to assess how we are structured in order to create readiness sustainability and also assess that agility, which I told you I think is so important. And finally, we want to look at how we can better enable industrial-based performance. A few examples. We are working to improve predictability through the entire ship depot maintenance process by building a more comprehensive understanding of the maintenance needs of our ships. We're demanding more disciplined adherence to proven planning principles such as milestone adherence when we do encounter the unexpected, that friction that I was talking about. And we're responding more quickly to reduce delays, barriers, if you will, associated with overly burdensome approval processes for getting new or growth work done. Now, I acknowledge that right now the word readiness is somewhat ill-defined, but I am done letting that get in our way. We can't afford to wait around for someone else to tell us what that means. So starting with a clean sheet, we will derive a hierarchy of readiness metrics from the fleet level to the unit level, first reviewing what we are being asked to do from the operational level of war down to the tactical level. So another way of looking at this is I want metrics associated with every item on the mission essential task list. This should help us answer the question, ready for what? And it will ensure we understand, using objective metrics, how any one unit's readiness affects the fleet's ability to perform its wider mission. I'm actually considering whether to establish a readiness czar, or perhaps more appropriately, a chief readiness officer that will fit within the panoply of force development, force generation, and force employment. We'll call it force readiness. To build this office of the chief readiness officer on my staff to more cohesively integrate, align, and assess our readiness. As part of this, we will examine the readiness reporting relationships of the various enterprises: aviation, undersea, surface warfare, expeditionary warfare, information warfare, and the shore enterprise. And I believe this should set the conditions for an actionable feedback loop between the fleets, the TICOMs, and the SysComs. Now, another effort underway, and I think it's very pertinent to my audience today, to you, is the concept of digitizing readiness. When we as the Navy, or the rest of the military for that matter, talk about digitization, talk about analytics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, we usually see this through the fleet lens. We're talking about how to achieve decision superiority in the fight, and that's all good. But this idea is just as important through the foundry lens, and fleet readiness will benefit significantly by bringing all of the same tools to bear on our readiness processes. In fact, I would argue that we have more unused data available for us here than we currently do for the fight. So think for a moment about the amount of data that we have sitting around, underused or unused, inside those data lakes across the architecture and ecosystem of the TICOMs, the SysComs, and the fleets. So in order to bend that curve, again, to maintain that competitive advantage, we need a deeper understanding of the link between our actions and readiness outcomes. And we will use descriptive analytics to mine historical data and derive the readiness drivers behind past successes or failures. And I believe that this will move our understanding of readiness beyond a set of closely held beliefs and to rigorously derived facts. Once we understand the true drivers behind our readiness outcomes, we must apply predictive analytics to forecast how much outcomes will change when we adjust our investments in those readiness drivers. With predictive analytics in play, we will find ourselves in a place where we're making data-informed decisions, maximizing the return on investment for the taxpayers. And if I really achieve this, get my way here, this would be the final frontier of analytical capabilities. It would take us to prescriptive analytics, where our automated analytical tools would accelerate our decision-making by suggesting decision options that might not have been aware if we had only relied upon human action alone. But as I briefly mentioned earlier, when discussing the Navy operational architecture, I think we need to start by treating our existing underused data as a valuable corporate asset, and we should apply those same standards, structure, and governance to it. And to accomplish this, I seek to establish a fleet analytics office that will develop the dashboards and reporting tools to see real-time what is going on. They will also develop a risk matrix that helps us assess risk against the mission and drive accountability. And we also need to assess whether we have the modern IT structure in place to support these efforts across the Navy's readiness exercise. So I'll wrap up, and I'll thank you again. Thanks again to both AFCEA and the Naval Institute for having me here this morning. And to all of you, the work that you do is so crucially important. The work that you do is critical to both the fleet and the foundry. And the work that you do will help us keep our cutlass sharp to maintain our competitive advantage and to meet the challenges of great power competition. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to your questions.
Admiral Pete Daly, Naval Institute, thank you for your great remarks. Could you talk a little bit about the intersection between readiness and distributed maritime ops? Because it strikes me that logistically and from a repair, even at the operational level of delivering parts for repair, becomes much more complex. Is there a conceptual activity that's mirroring this effort to get at that?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. I appreciate the question. I think I'm kind of tied to this platform, huh, because of the microphone. The DMO will not work unless we get the logistics piece right, and that truly is a readiness area that has our attention. In fact, I would tell you, Pete, that I look at readiness as a domain. So if we think about great power competition as a series of multis, right? Multilateral, multi-domain, multi-level, multi-axis. This idea of logistics as a domain, I think it has great power as we work our way through it. The nexus between readiness and DMO, of course, you can't execute the DMO without having the readiness to support it. And so how OFRP fits into that, or our ability to surge, if we are going to be the surge force, will rely on having a true understanding of the readiness of the force and what it's going to take to be ready to execute DMO. Because again, DMO is about being strategically predictable and operationally unpredictable, perhaps, as we see in dynamic force employment. That would be one of the great end states of achieving DMO. So logistics will be an important part of that. We should view it as a domain, and the nexus to DMO and readiness, I think, is very, very clear. You can't execute DMO unless you have a ready force. Yep.
Good morning, Admiral. Tim Jarrah from PEO C4I. I'm the lead experimentation for the PEO, and I've been working for the last year on Naval Tactical Grid Enabler 19 and just recently Large Scale Exercise 2020 to basically bring DMO into reality. But one thing we've been told recently is it's only pay as you go from the program office side. There's no money. Is there any changes, or are we going to have to wait for the POM process to bring that money to help the program office shift gears and meet your goals for DMO?
Right, thanks. Well, first of all, thanks for the work that you and your team do down there. When we think about the Navy operational architecture, the Naval Tactical Grid or Joint Tactical Grid is one of those 4 pillars that I talked about. So it is, in fact, absolutely critical. And while I obviously won't comment on the POM or the budgets that are about to drop, I think that if you read the DMO that was just recently signed out with the hand of the CNO on it, in which the naval operational architecture is so central, I think that you will see support for what you need to do to advance the Naval Tactical Grid, the Fleet Tactical Grid, within the 4 pillars of the naval operational architecture. So I'll leave it to Esh-1 to figure out how to do that. But you should know that the demand signal from the fleet, all 3 fleet commanders, is DMO is how we are going to fight. So Admiral Aquilino and PAC Fleet, Admiral Fogo at Navier, and I at Fleet Forces will continue to articulate the demand signal for the naval operational architecture, of which the Naval Tactical Grid is such a big part. And I'm confident that, recognizing the importance of what NOA brings to the fight, that we will resource that appropriately.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, sir. Megan Eckstein with USN News.
Hi.
The Navy, over the past few years, has evolved its training to focus on the high end by using more live submarines, more live P-8s, and other assets during training. Mm-hmm. And I imagine distributed maritime operations will require more of that as you look kind of cross-domain. Mm-hmm. So I wondered how you're looking at fleet training activities to get to that high end and to get to that DMO type of operations without maybe overburdening the fleet and asking too much of them outside of their own training needs.
Okay, thanks, Megan. That's a good question. High-end fight requires a certain stress on the teams that we're putting through their paces, if you will. and nothing replaces live opposition forces to make that happen. And so as we build out a COM2X, for instance, like Abraham Lincoln is going through right now, we look to resource and plan from the sustainment that the OFRP gives us. We look to resource and plan appropriate numbers of opposition forces to allow us to do the high-end fight. The real answer to your question, though, is not live forces, right? It's live virtual and constructive forces. And the advancements that we have made in LVC, the virtual and constructive portion of that acronym, are really, really impressive. The ability to stimulate the strike group writ large, from the strike group staff down to the sensors that each individual watchstander have to respond to from a virtual perspective is remarkable. I was just out on Abraham Lincoln last Friday and Saturday. I was observing their COM2X that their strike group is going through now. And I would tell you, it is way beyond the COM2X that I did just 5 years ago here with the Carl Vinson Carrier Strike Group. Let me give you an example of the power of LVC. Of course, we did have some submarines out there that were stressing the strike group. 2 live submarines, for example. But there were more than that to the strike group and the rest of the team because of the virtual nature of how we do business. But a very specific example of the power of LVC and what it brings to the fight. So while I was out there, weather came in and precluded some of the things that the Carrier Strike Group 4 had intended to do as part of the stimulus to the strike group. And so as we did an administrative move from one area to another area where there was better water and airspace and better weather conditions, we were able to leverage the power of virtual and constructive injects to the fleet such that we lost no training ability. So while we were unable to perhaps fly as many opposition forces live, it was transparent to the ship and the strike group team because they came in virtually. And the feedback, as I watched them work their way through this, you could not tell the difference, whether it was live or virtual. So live forces are important, as you say. It does take us to the high-end fight because of the thinking enemy that is there, but it's the live, virtual, and constructive synergies that come. That's where we're really bending the curve and allowing us to get to the high-end fight. The ability, for instance, of a sonar operator to sit at his stack and be stimulated in his ASW system, or an electronic warfare operator in the same way, without actually having a live opposition force doing that, is a game changer, and it's really, really impressive. I'm very, very confident that we're able to achieve the high-end fight with the appropriate mix of live, virtual, and constructive.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Admiral Justin Katz, Inside Defense. I wanted to ask you to elaborate on the readiness campaign plan that you mentioned. Specifically, when exactly did that get underway, and what are some of the first concrete steps you're taking as a part of that plan? And additionally, just a minor follow-up, you mentioned the Fleet Analytics Office. Did you say you will stand that up, or you're looking to stand that up? I didn't hear it correctly.
Yeah, so the Revolutionize Readiness campaign plan is perhaps the most important line of effort that I have as Fleet Forces. The initiatives that I described, those 3 areas that I described, are in fact the lines of effort that have come out of a lot of hard thinking over the last 3 months, pulled together by across the waterfront to include the other 2 fleet commanders as well. So I'm very excited that we are at the nascent stage, but they were on the right track. This isn't going to happen overnight, as you might expect. So as we build out the 3 lines of effort across those 3 things that I described to you, there will be a temporal piece to that. So we're just in the, as I said, this is startup current for us right now, and we're just moving out on that. I will sign out the campaign plan here over the next 3 weeks, and we'll get into actionable milestones and assessments and decision points where we will move forward. It cuts across multi-echelons, right? Both on the inputs into the plan and then on the decisions that we might recommend or things that we can do at the fleet level. And one of those is standing up the Fleet Analytics Office. I can do that. Now, you heard Secretary Maudley say yesterday that he's thinking about a chief information or reorganizing how we think about information management at the Echelon level. And my organization would be supportive of that effort. It's nested in under that effort. And I think what you're seeing there is recognition that information and knowledge management and how we think about data is common to the entire Department of the Navy. So he will set up his structure, and ours will be designed to support their efforts, but with that real fleet and foundry perspective that I think the 3 fleet commanders who are in the readiness business bring to it. Similarly for the fleet readiness officer. Kind of kicking my way through that one. You know, every time you stand up a new flagpole, that's another flag officer, and that's always hard, but we will work that out. But I think that's stuff that I can do at my level.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good morning, Admiral.
Hi.
Captain Richard Majette, Marine Operational Test and Evaluation Squadron 1 out of Air Station Yuma. Sir, a lot of the tenets you described for DMO are very much aligned with the Marine Corps' recent operational concept of EABO, or Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations.
Right.
Sir, how do you envision the Marine Corps' role in supporting DMO, more specifically with something like sea control?
Thanks. DMO, I think, enables EABO and Joint Forcible Entry and some of these other things. That's why it was designed. And so when I think about the distributed maritime operations concept, it's naval in its DNA. And so we recognize that, you know, when we talk about the global away team, the global varsity team, it's the naval components, right? And so the Marine Corps, Navy Marine Corps team will be central to DMO. So first I look at it, say, through the lens of JSF, right? So as we bring JSF to the big decks and we move them into the fight, that's a game changer that the Marine Corps will bring into the fight. 2 forms of power projection, right? 44 strike fighters coming off the carrier and a bunch of devil dogs coming out of a big deck amphib. Well, now we add JSF to that mix and throw some Tomahawk in. So the power projection piece, we are the best in the world at it, and we will maintain being the best in the world. That's a competitive advantage that DMO will give us, and the Marine Corps is a big part of that. Now the sea control piece, I do believe there's a large role for the Marine Corps in the sea control piece. And so the innovative concepts that Admiral Aquilino and his team are working through in the second island chain and how to leverage insertion of Marines to provide fires either from the ground that are quite mobile and we can move them from place to place or put them on the bigger decks. I see that as absolutely critical to making DMO work. Remember, that's distribution of the highest order, and so we can put them wherever we want them to help us get the sea control we need and enable that power projection. So DMO is truly a naval concept in its DNA. Marine Corps will be a big part of that, both in the power projection side of the house and then maintaining and achieving and maintaining the sea control that is so important.
Thank you, Admiral.
Thanks.
Admiral Grady, thanks for your insights. Mark Dowd, Microsoft. I was pleased to hear about the data strategy, and through the conference here from AFCEA and USN, a lot of the senior leaders have talked about data strategy, which is awesome to hear. You talked about usually processes and technology go with that. I would propose that from my experience, the people aspect or the culture is some of where we meet our challenges as we execute a data strategy to enable everything you talked about. Could you comment on how the Navy and Fleet Forces Command looks to change the culture in order to enable that strategy?
Sure. Well, it's always about the people, isn't it? And the culture that enables our people to succeed, the center of the universe, which is our sailors and our Marines and the civilians that support them across the AC and the RC. So the culture is important. In this regard, I think we're moving out on that pretty fast. I think people recognize there is a need for this kind of paradigm shift in how we think about data and how we design it from the ground up. And so from a cultural perspective, I think we won't have to change that from the top down, right? There's 2 ways to change culture, top down or bottom up. In this case, I think because of the work that many of you here do in this room, but the digital citizens that are our sailors, it's going to come from the deck plate up. And I think people see the great value in the way we want to attack our data strategies, for instance. So this idea, for instance, of separating hardware and software, right? The young sailor has grown up with an app-based mentality, and that's kind of what we're talking about. So you have a piece of hardware, maybe it's commercial off the shelf, and then as you want to change capability, you spin in a new app or new software, and you've separated that. That gets to the stovepipe nature of the data structure that I talked about in my written remarks. So when we design it from the ground up, then it will be this separation of hardware and software. It will be this app-based approach to things that will give us that agility to fight with the system as we have it, but also to maintain it and modernize it and improve it. So I think culturally, we're at a really good point because it's going to be from the deck plate up as opposed to having to be forced from the top down. It's largely to do, as I say, to the work that you do here, many of our professionals do in the information warfare community, and of course to our sailors and our Marines themselves who get this idea of app-based mentality and how to think about things. I don't think that's going to be a real hard part. Thanks. Okay, anybody else?
Sir, Bob Shea from AFCEA. We see the Army and the Air Force working on this concept of multi-domain operations. You take that with the DMO. Is there some type of structure that makes sure this all comes together? And where is that structure so that we're getting the full benefit and are able to maximize the capabilities that each one of the services brings to the fight?
Yeah, thanks. Well, first of all, there is one service that is multi-domain from the seabed to the space, right? And so you know who that is. And so clearly the Navy does. So again, back to multi. We think in multi-domain. I'm pretty impressed, though, that the other services are on par with us in that regard. And so then that suggests that we will never fight alone. We will always fight alongside our partners and our allies, for that matter, as they come along with the great ideas and what we can learn from them. So what you're looking for, I think, are the synergies that come from jointness and working together on both building the Navy the nation needs, or the joint force the nation needs, but then fighting with the Navy the nation has, or the joint force that the nation has now. And so I'm pretty confident that we are looking for those types of synergies. You're sitting next to a guy right there in Matt Winter, where it is truly a joint approach to how we bring the JSF into the fight. From a warp, so that's kind of a foundry way and a foundry example of how joint synergies are being brought together to move faster in the development of what we want to bring to the table, to bring to the fight, and to maybe move more efficiently from a money perspective as well. So that's kind of one example of the foundry side. On the fleet side, I have become a zealot in the understanding of the 5th gen to 4th gen fight, that transition, and what that means. I didn't know a lot about it until I worked with my Air Force counterparts over in Europe, and how we think about the joint fights. So now this is under the fleet lens, right? So I learned a lot from working with my Air Force counterparts on how you do a 5th gen to 4th gen transition. So when we think about the fight, we think about phases from phase 1 to phase 2, or from the offensive to the defensive, these transitional changes. The 5th gen to 4th gen transition is a huge one. And I learned about that from sitting shoulder to shoulder and fighting shoulder to shoulder with my joint counterparts over in Europe. So I think on the fleet side, we all recognize that we're never going to fight alone. And again, that goes to our allies as well. So the structure that you're looking for, I think, is kind of baked in now. Is it perfect? No. But I think we all understand and recognize that that's the way to go, both on the fleet side and on the foundry side. Thanks. Sir.
Good morning, Admiral.
Hi.
And this is sort of a follow-up to that question. We fight as a joint force, and we have a well-oiled machine that's proven itself in the Middle East for the last 20, 25 years. But that's not fighting Russia or China or near-peer competitor. Right. With the demise of JIFCOM in 2011, where's the glue that's pulling all that together for that near-peer competitor fight? Who certifies for joint forces going forward? Who's doing the tactical thinking about all of that, and who's bringing the other services to bear?
Okay, I'm going to speak to you from my perspective as fleet forces, and I would tell you that as we go through our force generation process to send force forward, the idea that they would have to integrate into the larger joint fight that is driven by the number fleet commanders first, and then the combatant commanders that the number fleet commanders serve. That's part and parcel of what we do. So back to Abe's COM2X, right, and what we were doing there. First of all, the entire 40-day, 35, 40-day piece has joint elements all the way through it, and I believe there's actually room for more, and so there's always the standing invitation for more Air Force play, more Marine Corps play, and we will achieve that as their fourth generation process allows them to do that. And then as we transition through the various phases of COM2X, we get to the theater phase, which is all about the joint fight and the integration with the joint force. And so I'm confident that the forces we send forward, and I'll use the strike group as an example, are ready to plug into the joint fight. And so from the fleet perspective, I'm confident that we can do that. During the theater and maneuver phase of the fight, we spend some time kind of focused on each area that they're going to go to, and then we open it up to fleet play and games on at the high-end fight. And the strike group has to respond and think joint as they do that. From the foundry side, I mean, again, I think it gets back to the answer that I had over here. I think we all recognize that there's synergies both in efficiency and in money that can be attained by thinking joint as we work our way through it. So Joint Strike Fighter is another example. I'll go much smaller in the aviation world, and the counter UAS challenge is there, and that's going to be a joint solution eventually as well. So I think there's great recognition, particularly given the customary fiscal restraints and constraints that we have. That's the right way. That's the right way to do it. Back to the data architecture that we were talking about doing. We would be ill-advised to build a naval operational architecture that builds on data policies that aren't joint, and indeed allied in that respect to the extent that we can do it. And we're not doing that. And so the work that is moving out on the data governance and policies that we talked about over here are going hand in hand with the joint force. So I think there's great recognition that that's the way that we should proceed, and I have confidence that we'll achieve that. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning, Admiral. My name is...
Always good to be the last guy.
Right? Good morning, Admiral. My name is Hernan Luis Prado. I'm the founder of Workshops for Warriors. For 11 years, we've been the only accredited school in the nation that does advanced manufacturing training for veterans, wounded warriors, and transitioning service members. You're hitting upon a problem that is affecting 3.5 million advanced manufacturing jobs in America right now that are unfilled due to lack of skilled labor. We run a school on Main Street across from your naval base. And the biggest challenge that we see is we see young men and women that are leaving the service, and after going through these advanced manufacturing training programs in 3D printing, robotics, artificial intelligence, by the way, they're all courses that are easily transferable to what the fleet needs. They get scooped up by Tesla, SpaceX, Facebook, Google. If we say people are the key, and we pay SEALs extra money, we pay aviators extra money, have we ever thought about paying advanced manufacturing sailors an extra bonus to keep them and retain them in the fleet so that we can get that corporate knowledge to a critical mass and really bring our fleet to the next generation so that we can not only compete with but dominate near peers?
Yeah, I appreciate the work that you and your team do. It's absolutely critical. So there's a lot to unpack there. So let's start with advanced manufacturing. Absolutely critical to what we're trying to do. So we can take a look at things like additive manufacturing. We got to get to the point, for instance, where we're not just building things in plastic, but things that are made of metal and can withstand high temperatures and pressures. That we can then turn a drop of power or some powder into into a part. And you can just imagine the logistics that challenges that helps us solve. But more importantly to me, what that breeds is a resiliency in your fleet and in the force. And so central to that, another example, for instance, is our Seabees. They now have the ability, from an adaptive manufacturing perspective or an additive manufacturing perspective, to go out and build about a 12 by 12 foot structure out of concrete using that technology. How quickly they can then bring their capabilities to bear. So we certainly recognize the value of those skill sets and what they mean. We are in a war for talent, there's no doubt about it, and so you've talked about some of the folks that like to take advantage of the great training that we give to sailors of the universe, which is our sailors. And so we do pull a bunch of different levers, whether it be bonuses or other things. And I'm confident that we look across the spectrum at our retention and our recruiting to see if we need to do more in those particular ratings. I don't believe I've seen the demand signal to actually do that, despite the numbers that you say, but it is not a process that's stasis, right? So we look at it all of the time to see if there are areas where things like selective reenlistment bonuses need to be applied. That's a constant process. It isn't. There's no end state to that. It's constantly being reviewed. So I guess I could commit to you that Bob Burke and his team up at Echelon are doing that, and that they're looking at it, and it is important. The other thing, though, I want to unpack from what you said is this idea of skill and mastery of technical crafts. And I believe that is a challenge that, when we talk about the Foundry, is pretty profound. And so I was just down on the waterfront talking to some folks, and we've had bids for ship depot maintenance that folks haven't bid on because they don't have the workforce to do it. And so the ability to encourage young people for whom college may not be the answer, or maybe they went to college and they're looking for something else, to become a true master in what they're going to do, whether it's in the fields that you describe or to be a 5XXX welder, who makes more money than any of us sitting here in this room, because there's only 40 of them and the average age is about 50 for those folks, right? To encourage that within our community colleges or our high schools or our community colleges is important. I went to the graduation ceremony of the apprentice program at our naval shipyard in Norfolk. Truly an amazing event. To a little over 200 men and women walk across the stage from all walks of life, people with PhDs in music who became a boat builder in this apprentice program, to folks right out of high school. And when I talked to some of them, particularly the high schoolers, they said, "Hey, what made you think of that?" And there wasn't a coherent response to that. It was, "Oh, just I had a dad who did it, or something I was interested in." So this feeling and this understanding that you can be you're not a worker, but you're a craftsman, a skilled master at what you do. We need to continue to encourage that. So whether it's in the high-end type of things that you talked about, or in welding, or being a ship fitter, or in the aviation community at the depots there, that's absolutely critical. I'll just give you a really personal example. My mother-in-law owns a company that makes high-end stairs. That sounds kind of boring, right? And like half of it is, right? They make these box stairs for apartment buildings and stuff, and she does quite well in that. But the other half of her business are these really architecturally designed stairs with swooping balusters and all that. She cannot find Americans to do that work. Every year, she lives up in New York City, she goes out to the trade schools and says, "I need cabinet makers. I got a job for you. We'll train you." Never gets any takers. Everybody's doing high tech or other things. But it's an example of, hey, if college isn't for you, or maybe it is and you want to try something else, then think about being a master of your craft. We need to respect and value mastery of a craft. And whether it's in the civilian side, in areas like you work, or leveraging vets who get out, or encouraging high school students to do it, it's critical to our industrial base. And I would tell you too, just to finish from the sailor perspective, this is critical to setting our Center of the Universe up for success as well. We talk a lot about fit and fill and getting the right NECs into the right spots, and that's all good. Those are all metrics that we have to talk about. What I want to talk about, though, and change the dialogue and the narrative, it should be about apprenticeship, journeyman, supervisor, and master, right? Are we developing masters in our sailors? That self-reliance that comes from adaptive manufacturing and some of the things that you talked about. It's about mastery. So it's the same for a kid in uniform, and it's the same for our industrial base. Mastery is something that should be respected, and I think oftentimes we don't do that well enough. And I would encourage you all to do that. All right, good. Thanks.
Not quite. Admiral Brady, we want to thank you for coming out here from the East Coast. Really, I know you've got a very, very busy schedule, and there's a lot of challenges and meetings that you have to attend to. But listening to you talk today, it was pretty clear that you've got your feet in two big camps, and we're fortunate to have someone of your caliber in that position. You're thinking ahead, and you've got to deal with today's issues. So on behalf of AFCEA and the Naval Institute, I'd like to present you this book, Fleet Tactics and Naval Operations, and I'll have an AFCEA bookmark in it. And again, we want to thank you very much for taking the time and honoring us with your presence here today. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, that wraps up this morning. I would ask you, though, to please take a moment to share your feedback on this session via the session survey and the West app. And we're ready to carry on with the rest of the day. So thank you, everybody, for coming today. What a great talk we had. Thank you.